Take any paper from your stash and turn it into a piece of tape to use on any project. In this tutorial, I'll show you the power of using a medium gray color with the overlay blend mode. It's almost magical how easy it is to make your own custom tape. This video is being filmed in advanced mode of Photoshop Elements, but the instructions are exactly the same for Photoshop, except where noted. So the first thing we need to do is prepare the workspace. I've already created a new 12-inch by 12-inch document at 300 pixels per inch with a white background. I've also already opened the Tape 1 file from the downloads for this lesson, and I've moved it onto my new document. For specific instructions on how to do this, please see the manual that comes with this lesson. Next, we need to open a patterned paper, like I've already done here. Now, as a note, you can use almost any paper for this tutorial. The only papers to avoid would be papers with large patterns, as they will be hard to see on a small piece of tape. So now in the Layers panel, right-click in Windows or Control-click on a Mac on the name of this paper layer and choose Duplicate Layer. Then in the dialog box, set the destination to the untitled document, and then you can click OK. Now you can close the paper file. And once you do, it should bring you right back to our untitled or new document that we started with. Now we're going to customize the tape. So now in the menu bar, choose Layer, Create Clipping Mask to clip the paper to the tape layer. So now that we've clipped this paper to our tape layer, all of the texture from the tape layer has been covered up, and we want to fix that. So we're going to do that here in the next few steps. But before we do, let's zoom in. We'll press Control+ in Windows or Command+ on a Mac a few times so that we can better see the tape. Now in the Layers panel, we're going to change the blend mode of this paper layer from normal to overlay. And now we can see the texture of the tape is shining through the paper. So we can see some of the creases here in the tear of this tape. You can see the texture, especially in some of these medium colors here. It looks really good. So it's a really neat little trick to let the texture of the tape shine through, but also keep the colors and the patterns of the paper. So now that we have our tape, we can add a drop shadow. And because tape in general usually is very close to the background paper, it's not going to have a large drop shadow. But before we can do that, in the Layers panel, we need to click on the tape layer to make it the active layer. Then in the menu bar, choose Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. In the dialog box, we'll set the lighting angle to 120 degrees, and then we'll click directly on the words Drop Shadow to activate it and open the settings. So for the size, we're going to set it to 2. For the distance, we'll set it to 4, and we're going to leave the opacity at 35%. Again, we don't want this drop shadow to be very large at all because tape is very close to the background layer. And then once you're done, you can click OK to close the dialog box. Photoshop users, please see the manual for specific instructions on adding a drop shadow. Okay, so here I've added my custom tape over top of a frame. In real life, whenever you put tape over something like this, you'll see a faint line in the tape from the change in elevation as the tape travels from the frame to the background paper. Adding realism to our custom tape is something we can easily do using either the dodge or burn tools, but using either of these tools is something that's called a destructive process. So I'm going to show you an easy way you can use these tools in a non-destructive way. But before I show you how, let's talk about how to know if you should use the dodge or burn tool. The tool you should use for adding realism to your tape will depend on the placement of the tape and the lighting angle you use on your page. For almost all of my scrapbook pages, I use a lighting angle of 120 degrees. That means my light is coming from the top left and shadows are cast to the bottom right. So if I place my tape along the bottom edge of a frame or a piece of paper, I'm going to want to use the burn tool because the burn tool makes things darker. And since my shadows are cast to the bottom right, darker is the right tool to use here. If I place my tape along the top edge, I'm going to want to use the dodge tool because that makes things lighter and my light is coming from the top left. The same goes for left and right edges. The left edge of an object like a frame or a piece of paper, you're going to want to use the dodge tool, and the right edge you'll want to use the burn tool. So whatever direction your shadow is cast, those are when you'll want to use the burn tool. The dodge tool is used in opposition to your shadow direction. So if your shadows are cast down and to the right, the dodge tool should be used on the top and left. So now that we understand that, I'm going to show you how to add realism in a non-destructive way. In this video, I'll show you how to use the burn tool on a piece of tape that is along the bottom edge of my frame. The steps are almost the same for using the dodge tool, but please see the manual for the exact steps if you need them. So first, in the Layers panel, we're going to click on the paper layer that is clipped to our tape layer to make sure that that's the active layer. Then we're going to click on the Create a New Fill or Adjustment Layer icon and choose Solid Color. In the dialog box, we're going to set the hex number right here to 808080. We're doing this specific hex number because it is 50% gray. Then we will click OK to close the dialog box. So now in the menu bar, choose Layer, Create Clipping Mask to clip this color fill layer to the tape layer. Now, as a note, the gray layer should be above the paper layer in the Layers panel. If it isn't, make sure that it is. Now, in the Layers panel, we're going to change the blend mode of this gray layer from normal to overlay. Next, in the Layers panel, Control-click in Windows or Command-click on a Mac on the thumbnail of the frame layer or the journal card layer or whatever it is that you have underneath your tape to get a selection outline. So I'm going to do that here. Then I'm going to press the keyboard shortcut of Shift-Control-I in Windows or Shift-Command-I on a Mac to invert that selection. Next, we're going to get the burn tool. In the tool options, set the range to midtones and the exposure to 50%. Choose a soft round brush from the brush picker. If you don't see the soft round brush from the default brushes, you can click on the flyout menu and choose Large List. And then make sure you set the size to 35 pixels. Photoshop users, please see the manual for setting up the burn tool. Now, before I close the tool options, as a note, if you're using a patterned paper that's clipped to your tape that is mostly white, something very bright, you're going to want to change the range from midtones to highlights because otherwise it's not going to really do anything. The burn tool is going to make something darker, but if there aren't any midtones in the paper you're using or very little, then it's not going to change anything. So you would need to change it to highlights so that it's working on the very brightest colors of the paper. You may also need to adjust the exposure of the burn tool from 50% all the way up to 100%, and you may need to brush a few times in order to get the desired look. So then I'll click to close the tool options here. Now I'm going to zoom in on my document again by pressing Control+ in Windows or Command+ on a Mac a few times just to be able to better see what I'm doing. So then on the document, hold down the Shift key and click and drag a line across the tape just below this selection where you want that crease to kind of show up. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key. Oh, and if you're in Photoshop Elements, you may or may not get this warning about needing to simplify this shape or this fill layer. So just click OK if you get this warning. If you don't get the warning, everything's fine and you don't have to worry about it. So then you can press the Shift key, press and hold the Shift key, and then click and drag a line across just under that selection. Now, if it's still pretty hard to see, I'm going to keep holding down the Shift key and click and drag back just to increase the strength of that burn into the image. Now I'll press Control-D in Windows or Command-D on a Mac to deselect. And now you can see there's just this faint darkening here of the tape. You could even try to make it a little bit darker if you wanted. I could press Control-Z in Windows or Command-Z on a Mac to undo deselecting. And I'll just do one more stroke across the tape. And then I'll press Control D in Windows or Command D on a Mac to deselect, and that looks really good. So now I'm going to press Control 0 in Windows or Command 0 on a Mac to zoom back out. And I can see that now my tape has some realism and some depth added to it. From here, you can finish making a scrapbook page using your custom tape. I've included 5 tape PNG files in the downloads for this lesson. Another fun twist would be to practice layering 2 pieces of tape on top of each other. Now here's a scrapbook page I made using my custom tape pieces. I love how the 2 pieces of tape overlap and make this little cluster down here at the bottom of the frame. They're not too big to where they draw attention away from the photos, but they just add some extra pattern and color to the page, and it's really good visual interest without being overwhelming. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to our channel. This has been Jennifer Juris with Digital Scrapper. We help you get your stories told.